At its best, the BIA unit is able to rely and rotate three corners, and that's the only three things reference that is going to happen on this Thursday on the beat. It is Spring Rewind, position review for the Ohio State cornerbacks, best in America, as they're known. That is Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. This is the Austin and Berm Show, and I think, Berm, corners might be even better this year than last year, which sounds like a crazy thing to say.
It does, but it's also probably true. I think the ceiling is higher for this group than last year's group. You lose one guy from last year's team, and he's a 5th-round draft pick in Denzel Burke, a player that started for 4 years at Ohio State, which is interesting. If a 4-year starter at Ohio State at cornerback ends up being a 5th-round pick, I think that tells you pretty much all along where the NFL people thought Denzel Burke's future was and where they slotted him, because I don't think he got worse in 2024, even though he had, the albatross of the first Oregon game hanging around his neck all season. But Denzel was what we thought he was. He was a very good corner, very physical, a guy that could help in a lot of ways on the field, and a good leader in that room. And I think that's ultimately where the questions for me about this year's group are going to be. It's not about the talent, because I do believe with what you said, I agree. I think this year's the talent is better right now, but is the leadership going to be there? Are they going to get what they need when things go bad? Because I think having Jermaine Mathews, obviously very vocal guy, stepping into the spotlight. Davison Igbinosun is not really the vocal guy off the field. He's not really, he's a chatterbox on the field to the other team. But how does he step up and fill that vacuum of the loss of Denzel Burke? And then you have Aaron Scott and Devin Sanchez, who I think are in a position on the outside to really raise the level of play, but they're both young and inexperienced.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've got the potential here to not just rely on three cornerbacks, but maybe more based on the talent here. We'll see if that's what Tim Walton elects to do. But I do think the replacing Denzel Burke part is pretty fascinating because of what you mentioned with the leadership. And as his career progressed, he became a lot more calming in the secondary than he was initially, where he was playing with emotion and bordering on chippiness at times, and certainly very cocky as he got that, and maybe in a good way. I would say in a good way as a freshman, believing that he had the confidence to go play that position. But I think that as he matured, that leadership style became different. And I wonder if that will happen for Davison Igbinosun and Jermaine Mathews, because I don't know that they're ever going to grow out of their brashness, loquaciousness, willingness to go mix it up in the corner of the end zone before games and fight, which I love about them. Let me make that clear. I've not changed my stance. You got to have corners who have that wild card shank ability. I think that's important, and I love watching it. But you do need one, I would think, who can maybe stabilize things.
Yeah, and I don't know, as you look at this list of guys that are coming back, I don't know who I would expect that to be. Aaron Scott hasn't really earned the right to step up to be that guy yet, but maybe in year 2 he is that guy. Who knows? Bryce West played sparingly at the end of last season in his first year and made some plays, but a guy that we don't know exactly where he fits. We don't have Lorenzo Styles Jr. on this list, and as we talked about the safeties last week, we don't really know where Bryce West and Miles Lockhart and Lorenzo Styles fit into this rotation, whether they're safeties or corners. But certainly Bryce West and Miles Lockhart and Aaron Scott, all heading into year 2, are not established leaders for this team. Devin Sanchez, certainly only been on campus now for 5 months, does not have the cachet, I think, to be that guy. So it has to be Igbinosun or Jermaine Mathews, unless it's Lorenzo Styles, who I think is probably the most likely to put on the hat of calming influence. I mean, Lorenzo, it's hard to get him excited about anything from when you talk to him. So I think he might be that emotional stabilizer. But again, we don't know exactly where he fits onto the field. And in most cases, the players on the team respond to the guys who are playing and stabilizing, and not always the guys that are just the emotional leader off the field. So Lorenzo coming into year 4 is certainly going to be an interesting piece of this puzzle, but we don't list him on here because we don't know if he's a corner or safety. So, we probably could have lumped all the defensive backs together. I'm interested this year. We're heading into year 3 of Jermaine Matthews. He switched his number. He went from 24 to 7. When Denzel Burke switched his number 3 times, right? He went from 29 to 10 to 5 back to 10. Do you think that the number shifting had any relation to his maturity?
Well,
I know that's a weird question, but I kind of mean it.
I felt like I was noticing a more veteran presence from Jermaine Mathews throughout spring. Now, I don't know if it was related to number changes. I don't know if it's just the length of time in the program, the confidence that Ohio State had shown in him. Everybody has NIL conversations after the season, and certainly Ohio State made Jermaine Mathews a priority for that. Maybe it's and probably is a combination of all of those factors. Jermaine was not someone, I think, in years past during open practices that I would see after drills, maybe getting 3 or 4 extra on-air reps or mental reps. He's certainly not someone, and wasn't in a position where he needed to do this. He was not a senior. He was not an upperclassman. He did not need to go offer tips to younger guys. He has elevated into that role, and I thought there were, 10 times during these practices where I saw Jermaine go do that, whether that was talking with Aaron Scott, Bryce West, Devin Sanchez, anybody. I thought that he was taking that part onto his shoulders. If you ask me, I would think that Davison Igbinosun is probably more in line to do that, given the volume of experience and high leverage snaps that he's had. I think he's the one that can maybe impart that wisdom. But when you watch the two of them, I do feel like Jermaine has maybe embraced that more openly, and Davison never does that in public. So if he's got that key role in the room for Walt, he probably does. But I think often we see this with Ohio State's best corners, where they're doing that inside and outside of team rooms in practice, and then carrying that over to Saturday. And I expect that that's what Jermaine's going to do, whatever number he's going to wear. I think that this is a really interesting year. And the part that jumped out to me most, Berm, as you're talking about nickel and Lorenzo Styles, was when Jermaine came out and had his spring availability day, he was asked about that. It wasn't, I got to play outside. If they need me to play nickel, I think there's a lot of opportunities, and I'm probably going to dominate there, which was like, that's encouraging. And you didn't see any pushback. When Aaron Scott was lined up at outside corner and Jermaine slid into the nickel, that looked like a group that was, really full of potential, bursting with potential. And you can't make that happen unless these corners with NFL draft stock, which both Jermaine and Davison have now, if like one of them, I think, needed to take that challenge on, and Jermaine seemed to really want it.
Couple things. One of the things you lose with Denzel Burke being gone, and you mentioned how the team's top corner has sort of emerged as a vocal leader for every group on the team. They become the truth teller. Jermaine Mathews is certainly that. He's a guy that's going to do it. He doesn't have to be that vocal doing it, because they have a really vocal and exceptional and longtime leader at corner with Tim Walton as the leader of that group. But what you get with Jermaine Mathews, I think the best version of the Ohio State defense will involve Jermaine Mathews at the slot. And so I don't know exactly what that means for Aaron Scott or Devin Sanchez or Lorenzo Styles or how they work it out. But to me, watching the defense in the spring, watching the defense even in the spring game, when Jermaine Mathews is at the slot, I think that's where I feel the most comfortable. I think that he has the right talent, the right mindset, the right ceiling to be the perfect replacement for Jordan Hancock in that spot. And we're talking about cornerbacks today, and we're not going to really mention Jordan Hancock as one of the departures. But when Ohio State recruited Jordan in the class of 2021, Jordan was the top cornerback on the board for Ohio State. Now, he developed into this multifaceted defensive back tool where he's playing safety and corner. But in the NFL, Jordan Hancock's going to be a cornerback. So I believe that Jermaine Mathews is the right fit for that. And I believe he's also the right fit to be the truth teller of the team. I mean, he said in the spring, I think we're the most talented cornerback room in the country. I thought that last year as well. Nothing has changed. We're BIA for a reason. Like that's the guy who's going to step up and he's going to speak out, and he's always going to say what he thinks. And then you just have to go out there and back it up. And I think that we've seen Tim Walton's group just continue to climb since Tim Walton returned to Ohio State after the 2022 season, or before the 2022 season. And there's no reason to think it's going to slow down with this group because, as I said at the jump, I think the talent level with Aaron Scott, Devin Sanchez, Davison Igbinosun, Jermaine Mathews, Bryce West, Miles Lockhart, and then Jordan Woods coming in next week, I think has a higher ceiling than we've had in that room top to bottom since probably 2017 or 2018.
It's pretty wild in a lot of ways, Berm, what Tim Walton has rebuilt. It's not from scratch, but it might have been close with what he inherited in that 22 year. We got a number of questions back then about, was Tim Walton the right hire? Should Ohio State move on? What happened to the corners in 2022? And I don't think he was, from the outside, given as much benefit of the doubt as he deserved, both from his track record at the NFL level and looking at the difficult situation that he inherited with a relatively thin group and then a group that was decimated by injury. But Ryan Day believed in him, and he gave him that patience to play out of year one and into year two. You saw clear growth. You saw recruiting success. Then he built on that in year three. And now Ohio State's got a national championship to show for it. And then this group where it's like you have more high-level 4- and 5-star recruits than you have positions that you can actually use them on the field, which is what everyone is trying to aspire to build. And he's probably, Tim Walton, I think, the prime example of a Ryan Day home run hire that at the time and even through a year didn't really get that reputation or hadn't solidified it with results yet.
Yeah, and that's fine. Like, things take time to build. We don't live in a world where a guy takes over and immediately he is the best coach in the world at his position. Jim Knowles had Ohio State's defense by the time he left as the number one ranked defense in the country in nearly every statistical output that mattered. But in 2022, Tim Walton's first year, there was a lot of confusion. There was a lot of guys who didn't know what they were doing. And the results on the field, I think, had people expecting or seeing a potential slowdown in recruiting as well. And that has gone away. So Tim Walton has earned everything. He's a guy who's won a national championship with Nick Saban as his head coach at LSU. He's been a dozen-year NFL veteran and defensive coordinator. And I think it's one of those. It's akin to me of like when a kid is committed to Ohio State from Ohio, people automatically kind of overlook him and be like, oh, well, what about the guy from Florida? What about the guy from Georgia? Tim Walton being an Ohio State alum, a guy who played 4 years for the Buckeyes in the 90s, I think people just kind of overlook him like, oh, well, he doesn't come in here and immediately turn into Brian Hartline, so he's not going to be good down the road. But like, everything takes time. And now he's a co-defensive coordinator. He's working with Matt Patricia, a guy that he has a ton of respect for and worked with at Syracuse 25 years ago, which is, we are seeing the full circle moment for Tim Walton. And it's good. I'm glad to see that he's finally getting appreciated the way he should be at Ohio State, because his legacy and what he's built is really, really good. And now it's about turning that into NFL draft success, because that's still the question people are going to have about him at Ohio State, because despite the growing success on the field in the last couple of years, we have not seen the defensive backs at corner specifically really translate into high draft picks in the NFL. And that's the next hurdle he's going to have to get over before people, I think, give him the full benefit of the doubt the way they have with Hartline and where they're going to with James Laurinaitis.
Yeah, I mean, the way that this year goes for Davison Igbinosun and Germaine Matthews is going to be key to that, and people will be already tracking the development of Devin Sanchez. He's got multiple years to go, but there's certainly someone I know was comparing him to Jeremiah Smith, the Jeremiah Smith of cornerbacks. So, which is insane.
It's an insane comparison to make, because the cornerback position cannot impact a game the way the wide receiver position can on a play.
Then why did you do it, Berm?
Because the upside is there, because he has the ability to come in and start. And I'm not going to rule out the possibility that he's a starter for Ohio State against Texas on August 30th. I do think that, like most people, Devin Sanchez saw an opportunity when he got to Ohio State and then realized, oh, this is a little harder than I thought, as he mentioned to Jordan Woods, and Jordan talked about on the beat with us on Wednesday morning. there is a transition period that happens for everyone, and it happened for Jeremiah Smith too. He's just, he's
it was
just
like
not
5 minutes. For
he's just not as impacted by the Earth's yellow sun as the average people are. So what you get out of Devin Sanchez here, I think the most important 2 months for Devin are these two that are happening right now, because you get a chance to take a deep breath, catch your breath, reassess where you are. And when the Buckeyes start fall camp at the end of July, like, you are no longer a freshman. Yeah, this is your first year, but you've been through the rigors. You've seen what it takes. And now it's about whether or not the talent takes over. And there's nobody in the room more talented than Devin Sanchez. And I think that my favorite thing about this cornerback room as it's currently constructed is how each of them, Devin Sanchez, Aaron Scott, Jermaine Mathews, Bryce West, Davison Igbinosun, probably to a lesser degree because he's a fourth-year guy and firmly settled as a starter. I love seeing them talk trash to, like, the world. Like, how dare you forget about me? How dare you assume that someone's going to start over me? And I think that sets up perfectly for Ohio State to get the most out of all these guys. And if the talent rises to the top, if the cream rises, which it generally does, I think the conversation about Devin Sanchez at the end of the season is going to be significantly different than it was at the end of spring, where people are saying, oh, look at that, he hit the freshman wall. Oh, look at that, he hit the freshman bump. But what is a reasonable expectation for a first-year player at Ohio State now versus what it was 10 years ago? I mean, Devin Sanchez is going to have to play because there's a lot of assets getting into him being on campus. And so now you got to make sure that you have a chance to get the most out of it without, that's the catch-22 here as I ramble, without damaging him, because you can put a freshman in a position where they're not ready. And the hit that they take to the ego and to their self-esteem can derail them for a whole year or two. So it's an interesting balance that Tim Walton has to strike.
Yeah. And I mean, Aaron Scott and Bryce West both came in with those kind of high, lofty expectations, maybe not to the Jeremiah Smith of the defense level that was talked about with Devin Sanchez, but certainly Aaron Scott had, what did he wind up as the number one corner in the class? Or he was a 5-star. It doesn't matter. I mean, he was up there. I think landing that and winning that commitment was one of
number
the bigger,
5. He was the number 5 ranked corner in the composite rankings and the On3 industry rankings.
Okay.
So pretty good. Bryce West was number 10. So yeah, I mean, when Devin Sanchez is number 1, like that's exponential, right? Like the gap between 5 and 1 is pretty large in most cases.
It is, but often like 2 through 5 may not be. Like, you could flip a coin through that. And so Aaron Scott had put himself in that conversation a year ago. And I think you referenced some of the confidence from these guys and feeling overlooked. I like the way that Aaron Scott embraced put that chip on his shoulder, to use that cliche, like with, the way that he talked, the way that he interacted on social media, but more importantly, the way that he practiced. Because look, Devin Sanchez walks out there for the first 2 practices and they're not in pads, and you look at him and your eyes immediately go like, this guy is different. He doesn't look like the rest. He does not look like a true freshman. And if you're not playing in pads and you're just going on air or one-on-one reps against wide receivers, like, Devin Sanchez was in a great spot to win some of those without having to understand the responsibilities of playing corner, to understanding the scheme, to then putting the pads on and then playing physically. And as gifted as Devin Sanchez clearly is, Aaron Scott does have a year advantage of experience and physicality and time in the weight room to build on. And he, I think, once you shifted into the middle of spring camp, had an opportunity to show that. And I feel like he did. When we saw that next wave, when Germaine Matthews moved into the slot, the next corner in there was not Devin Sanchez. It was Aaron Scott. And he did not look out of place. He made, whether it's Student Appreciation Day, some opportunities in the spring game in the horseshoe, he broke up passes. He flew to the football. He looked like he belonged out there. And that shouldn't come as a surprise to someone who was the composite number 5 corner in the class a year ago. Once you've had that opportunity to build on it, that still means you have to go out to work and earn it. And I just think Aaron Scott did not sit back and say, well, I should have got this playing time and I should be ahead of Devin Sanchez in spring camp. I think he deserves credit for the way that he practiced throughout spring to show that it was deserved. And that Devin Sanchez, if he is going to be out there against Texas or by midseason against Penn State, he's going to have to earn it. He's going to have to supplant all three of these guys in some form or fashion, or at least Aaron Scott.
What you have to remember is that we would be having an entirely different conversation about Aaron Scott if the end of the 23 season didn't happen the way it did. If the Ohio State didn't lose to Michigan and then lay a colossal egg against Missouri, Jordan Hancock and Denzel Burke were not supposed to be on the roster this past year, and Aaron Scott was going to have a different role. He came and committed to Ohio State because he thought, hey, there's a clear path to being cornerback number 3 as a true freshman behind Igbinosun and Jermaine Mathews. Igbinosun could have been gone. So you don't, or after this year. So it could have looked totally different. So for Aaron to be able to put on the, like, I don't want to say good soldier hat and just, fight through it and say, hey, I'm not going to let myself be frustrated by the fact that my path is maybe different than I thought it was going to be when I committed and when I signed, because everything changed after that. So how you respond to that sort of change of plan says a lot about you. And Aaron has done it the right way. He's gotten a lot bigger. He looks physically ready to play at Ohio State. And that's why, as we said at the start, like the ceiling for this group is probably better than it's been for a while when you go top to bottom. And that doesn't even include talented walk-ons like Inky Jones, who have shown that he can play at Ohio State as well. So it is an interesting offseason, but how Aaron Scott and Devin Sanchez develop, I think, is what directly correlates to what Jermaine Matthews' role is for Ohio State this fall. Because if those two step up in a way that says, hey, or if one of those two steps up in a way that says, we can't take you off the field, then having Jermaine Matthews in the slot, again, to me, which is where he fits the best in this defense, it really changes the entire projection of the defense for me.
This is wild speculation. I mean,
I love wild speculation. It's my favorite kind of speculation.
To what we talked about at the beginning. There is a possibility that the Jermaine Matthews leadership influence and his 2 years of waiting to take on a more prominent role becomes a situation where he can go to Aaron Scott and Bryce West and say, look, man, I believe in the process. I believe in Walt. I believe in Ohio State. I thought I was going to play earlier. I thought Denzel and maybe IGB were going to be gone. I was going to be starting as a sophomore. It didn't happen. I had to find a way to get better and take the next step and contribute wherever possible. Again, I don't know if that happened. I'd love to find out as we get through the summer and we get back maybe during camp season around these guys and get to pick their brains about how their summers are going, how spring actually went with a little bit of hindsight, what it's like in the room. Maybe that's what we'll find out. I don't know. I've only got a limited time around Aaron Scott, much more around Jermaine Matthews, but I would be surprised if the things that we're seeing from Jermaine as a leader, if that didn't directly tie into some communication with these guys. It's like, the grass is probably not going to be greener. There might be green money elsewhere, but in terms of development, like, this is where you want to be. In terms of competition, this is where you should be. And if you want to achieve it at the highest level, sometimes it does take time. And we don't always see that a lot in college football these days, but there does seem to be something to this room, the Ohio State wide receiver room, safety room, like that brotherhood, that culture is real, but somebody has to do that. And it feels like you wouldn't have been in a position maybe to keep Aaron Scott, Bryce West, maybe even Miles Lockhart engaged if you didn't have the next guy to say, hey, this is what the process actually looks like. I'm here for a reason and you should be too.
Well, that's the difference between the public facing side of this stuff and the internal private discussions. We're not privy to every private discussion that happens, but we do see the speculation the last 2 Januaries about Jermaine Matthews in the transfer portal and people wondering if he's going to leave because he hasn't played enough. The same conversations we'll have about CJ Hicks whenever we do a position preview that slots him in there, because every offseason there's this belief from a segment of the fan base that says, hey, this kid he's earned it. He has every right to be in that spot. And that's just it's not real life. Like, things have to shake out in a certain way for you to have your moment, your opportunity. I'm confident that Jermaine and Aaron, who are 2 of the most confident people I've ever covered on the recruiting side of things, I know that both of those 2 think that they are ready to go and ready to be the man for Ohio State. It won't take long until Devin Sanchez has the same sort of aura and swagger about him. And Davison Igbinosun certainly doesn't lack it either. So what you find here is a group of guys that all are supremely confident in themselves. We see that on the social media stuff. We see that with the emojis with the smoke out of the nose or whatever, whenever people talk about someone else. But all these guys, as long as they're taking that side of it and then doing that publicly and turning around and saying, hey, I got you, we're in this together on the private side, I don't care what gets said publicly. Ohio State is always going to make sure that its best players get taken care of. And the fact that they have gone to bat as a university the last 2 off seasons to make sure Jermaine Mathews was still there, I think speaks volumes about what they believe his potential is, not just on the field, but as a leader and a face of the program.
Well, clearly we believe that the Ohio State corners are in great shape and going to be very good again. I promise not every spring rewind is going to be maybe as hyperbolic, as confident.
Was that hyperbolic? This is the greatest group of cornerbacks in the history of Ohio State football this month.
I mean, I still introduce them as the best in America, which is the highest praise that you can give. And even if that's their own moniker, we don't have to say it if we don't believe it. I do think they're back to that point, but I don't know that I would call every unit on Ohio State's team the best in America. And we'll get to those as we continue through, look back at Spring Rewinds. Still intending to bring to you a mailbag for Freaky Friday. So if you've got those questions, send them our way, however you deem fit. And we'll get to those on the beat.
DMs are open on Twitter. It's just at Berm on Twitter. If you're watching this on 10 TV Plus and you're like, who are these guys? Why are they here? You can follow me at Berm on Twitter. He's at Award Sports, and just send your questions there. My DMs are open.
Okay, you heard it, folks. DM Berm, whatever you want, and he will answer. We'll dive into those on a Freaky Friday version to head into the Memorial Day weekend. So if you enjoy these, please keep watching. Please keep subscribing wherever you're listening or watching. We've got more coming, and we will be, I promise, on YouTube very soon. But thanks for joining us on 10 TV Plus at 97.1 The Fan as well. For Berm, I am Austin. We will talk to you tomorrow.